the idea that WWE is not taken seriously in the outside world, the idea that it's just such a cluttered streaming market and there's just all this competition out there, that we had to do it. Um, it does make sense for a much larger company to want your content and to be able to give you more money now for it than you're able to extract now. But maybe it's the content. But that's sort of the last kayfabe of this wrestling industry, is that the man with the pencil is not doing anything wrong. He's not standing in the way of greater revenue generation. Um, Nick Khan himself has said on one of these earnings calls, not the last one, but I think maybe the one before that, that I think it was in response to a question about ratings, that he thinks the content is great. So there's no willingness at this moment. There kind of has been in the past willingness to acknowledge that there's a problem with the content. But Nick Khan thinks it's great. Uh, Vince McMahon just got to dismiss the vision of his son-in-law, Paul Levesque, a vision of wrestling that conflicted with his vision of wrestling. He's reestablished old comfort blankets like Bruce Pritchard into creative. Uh, how much does this matter? How much does creative matter to the business, to W's business in particular? I think creative matters quite a bit in wrestling business. In W's case, I think creative matters. It's just that in their case, I think they're to a point here where it's bad, economically speaking, in that it's turned off fans on an annual basis roughly since 2016. I know some of this is obscured and complicated by COVID when we look at the data, but it's not as if Google web search and Q4 ticket sales and merchandise sales and product licensing has returned to the level that it was at in 2016 or 2017. It hasn't. But none of that can be pointed to the content, the creative. And I think it's sort of at a point where the worse it gets doesn't really change how the consumer revenues are. If it was better, I think the consumer revenues would improve. But it's sort of at a hard floor where it can be the way it is, which is if you watch a premium live event like the Royal Rumble, and if you're trying to make sense of anything that you're seeing on the screen in any scope beyond this is what Vince likes or this is what makes Vince laugh, you're wasting your energy. If it got even worse, which I mean, what does worse mean in this context is subjective. But if it gets worse, which I think it will, history has taught me that it only will, it does, as he gets older. It's not going to crater this business beyond the point that it's at. What does continue to hurt consumer behavior as it relates to WWE are other external things like no fans in attendance, what your TV competition is, and things like that. But in a sense, it's a hard argument to make because it's just speculation that, well, if they could cultivate stars, if they could plan long-term storylines and actually execute those long-term storylines, if they could present characters who felt authentic, if Vince McMahon could evaluate talent in a way that reflects the emotions, in a way that actually harnesses the emotions of his audience, if he didn't book too many rematches, and if he didn't think that doing DQ finishes where Seth Rollins is in the ropes and Roman Reigns doesn't release the hold, and that gets a lot of that causes a disqualification, that gets a lot of boos. If he didn't think things like that were good heat when they in fact are bad heat, their business would be doing even better than it is. But there's so much business to business revenue that WWE is going to continue to grow their revenues because they happen to be in this really beneficial media environment where their US TV rights fees are probably going to continue to multiply in the next round. And they're really well positioned to ensure that's going to happen. They've got a very effective negotiator installed to make sure that that happens. The ratings are still highly ranked enough, and they're not trending anywhere but stable. And that makes me think that they're going to be popular enough, still popular enough, to garner really good TV rights fees. You know, as the rap that starts off this program every week says. Great success means great profit. Mediocre success still means profit.